All right, I'm going to do this 30 years in about 7 minutes. All right. I broke things down for myself in phases. I know we call things seasons, but for me, I feel like there was some big phases in my life. Phase 1 is just a little background. I come from a military family. My parents divorced when I was in the 3rd grade. My mom got breast cancer. I grew up very poor. I became very self-sufficient at a young age. Mind you, at this point in my life, I had no spiritual foundation, no God, and I was hopeless and alone. Phase 2, I say I'm kind of waking up. I know I'm part of a journey. When I felt like becoming awake, I understood that I was going somewhere. I just wasn't quite sure where I was going. At 17, I got pregnant with my high school sweetheart. I finished high school with a baby. I went to college full-time. For you that know, I've been to college 12, I took 16 units the entire time I was in school. I worked full-time and I raised my baby. Still, no spiritual foundation, no God, and when I felt hopeless, it was now coming from past life, right? So I still had that phase 1 that was rolling over, so I was just burying stuff. Phase 3, I call it my floating stages. On the outside, my life looked really good. On the inside, I was broken, and I was starting to realize that things were not good. My mom got breast cancer again. I graduated from college. I accepted a job with Intel and moved to Folsom. I was a criminal justice major. I wanted to be a Charlie's Angel and move to the East Coast at the FBI. That was not my plan to work on chipsets at Intel. I trained for my very first fitness competition, and this is a big part of my story because when I was going through a hard time, going to the gym actually got the endorphins going in my body, and it did a lot for me that what the doctors were trying to prescribe me could not do. But still at this phase in my life, I still had no spiritual foundation, no God, and I was really feeling hopeless, especially seeing my mom go through like breast cancer again. Phase 4, the nightmare. At 27, I had no relationship with the Lord. My mother died. She had no will. My sister and my brother were taken over by a woman who was a Jehovah's Witness. And I say that because it was very confusing how to process death. We had an estate, and when you don't have a will done, it goes through probate. So guess who became responsible to clean up all the mess? I did. Still, remind you, I had no spiritual foundation, no God, and let me just tell you, hopelessness was awful. After I did my mom's funeral, my daughter went to go live with her dad. I remember one in particular time. It was 2 weeks. I hadn't left my place. I'd taken a medical leave of absence before I'd quit, and I was hungry, and I didn't want to leave my house. And I ordered pizza, and I told them, I'll just leave the money on the door, just tell them to knock. I mean, that's how disconnected I was. So doctors had me on antidepressants. I was so far removed from my spirit, I actually felt scared. I didn't even have the energy to pray. I was so empty that I could not even do that. Think about that. Have you ever been there where you're just so exhausted you can't even get on your knees and pray? I have been there. I was so broken and so badly in need of God, but I was just so tired I had no way of asking him to love me, to guide me. I didn't even know how to invite him into my life. My neighbor had found me unconscious in my bath, took me to the hospital, and I woke up in her bed 3 days later. It was the combination of like a spiritual breakdown, antidepressants. I would drink wine at night, and I was just so sad and disconnected. That is when I quit my job at Intel. I picked up my stuff, and I moved to Nashville to be with my best friend. And the scariest, most emotional and spiritual breakdown started to take place. I also started bartending at a place called Coyote Ugly, and that was not a good combination. Alcohol and depression do not go hand in hand. During this time, I was not taking care of my body, my soul, or my spirit. I know now that my spirit is a connection to God, my faith, my truth, and my intimacy with him. It is not the knowledge of God. I did not have the knowledge of God. It was his word. And you know how I got that? Through devotionals. That's how simple it started for me. And then there was scripture, and I started to believe those words. During this time, too, when you're going through a hard time, like your self-talk is so important, and positive self-talk and like adventure. I didn't have any of that. I was so negatively talking to myself. Also, the body needs, whether you're in a bad season or not, your body, you need to eat good, you need to keep your water intake, you need to sleep, you need to get rid of all those excessive behaviors, you need to work out. Well, guess what? I wasn't doing any of that. So those endorphins in my brain, there was no release. I thought I needed to get very serious about all my problems. I wanted to stay focused on my guilt, my shame. I stayed in a negative space. That is not what the Lord called us to do. No. So today, I give myself permission to take care of my body, and I do it daily. But what happens when you don't take care of your body? You lack sleep, you have no fun, and you have no faith or hope. What does that look like? It looks like a breakdown. That's what happened to me. I did not confront any of my issues, none. In my 20s, I had not confronted any of them. So it created a depression. I would literally go to bed and hope that I'd wake up and life would be different. That's just what I hoped for. I mean, that's where my hope was at. That did not work. My truth and God's love for my life was so hidden under all the lies. So my negative talk started to rule my life, my emotions, my spiritual happiness. I was living on autopilot in a very negative space. Our words have a ton of power. And if they're negative, they're not the truth of God. For me, I did not know that God loved me no matter what. I had no idea. I was not telling myself the truth, therefore, I didn't trust God. Eventually, I did find a church in Nashville. You know the little cards when you're new, you turn them in. Well, the pastor ended up calling me. I think I was drinking some beer by myself at home. I isolated very well. And he said, I don't know why I'm calling you. There's hundreds of these, but I want you to come and meet me in church. And I did. And so that was my introduction to kind of getting to feel better, but I definitely didn't know the Lord. I loved to work out. I would go out and run a lot in Nashville, and I would literally get on my knees, and I'd be like, God, please just tell me that you're there. And I would just sob. I would fall asleep in parks and just lay there writing in my journal. I would do anything. The wind would blow. I'm like, okay, that's for me. He's talking to me. I ended up moving back to California to clean up the mess that I had left behind. I had realized that it wasn't going to go anywhere until I faced it, and I was overwhelmed. I fought the state for custody of my little sister. My brother chose to stay in our hometown. That court battle lasted a year and a half, a little over a year and a half. Remind you, I still had no spiritual foundation or a relationship with God. I was just starting to discover him. At that time, the kid's guardian would tell me, she would call me and write letters and tell me, like, your mother is so disgusted in you. I'm trying to process death. Like, that was such a harsh statement from me, from somebody that said they were a godly person. It really, like, spiritually, it damaged me for a long time. She constantly questioned my parenting with my sister. She would call the school and tell the teachers that I was not a good sister. I would drive from Arden to Hazel. Do you guys know how long of a drive? An hour and a half to get my sister to school. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like barely surviving. I started a new job the day that my sister started her freshman year. Imagine our home. It was scary, extremely challenging, emotionally exhausting. I prayed almost every day holding my great-grandmother's rosary. I was sobbing. Again, I still didn't really have any tools in life. I had no relationship with God and no foundation. But then the spiritual revival. Yeah, come on now. I won custody of my little sister. That was huge, and that was a God thing. I ended up hiring a spiritual coach that I worked with on inner healing. I would go to her house, lay on her floor, and for a good year, all I did was cry. But you want to know what? It was my safe place for the very first time. She taught me how to pray, and she taught me how to meditate. So I got to pray to God, but I got to listen too. I competed in my first competition, and this was a really big deal for me. I started competing just to stay committed to something. I ended up going pro in the industry. In October, my mom died of breast cancer with a pink ribbon on my back with her death date on me. That's a God thing. I mean, that's not a coincidence. I started my own training business on the side of my corporate job to generate a second income and to follow my passion. I have failed so many times, even at this phase of my life, but guess what? I'm not abandoned and I'm not alone. I prayed for a good man. I married my neighbor. Woohoo! We have such a beautiful little boy, and you know what? My son will never know a life without the Lord, and so I just feel so good about that. I have a thriving business where I get to lead others through fitness, and I minister to them. I help them develop healthy behaviors. I lead them to a better quality of life, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Does not mean that it doesn't come with challenges and difficulties. I haven't arrived. I'm actually just coming out of a season. Having a baby without a mother brought up a lot of things for me. I felt alone sometimes. I was kind of scared with my baby sometimes, and I was missing my mother. I also wasn't necessarily accepted into my husband's family. So it brought up a lot of rejection, abandon, and I felt unloved, not good enough. And I really had to like buckle down with my community, my church, and God and get through that. But you know what? Now when I'm going through a difficult season, I accept the storm is real. I never accepted it when I was in it. I resisted. I know that God is my healer, and he will deliver grace to me, grace. And I believe I am deserving of his grace and his healing. I now know how to receive it. I never knew how to receive. I also stay aware of how I am in the seasons of my struggle. Therefore, I know that I need to ask God and my community when I need something. And the biggest part is I don't have to walk the storm anymore alone, right? I, without a doubt, know that God does not want my insides to be that bloody battlefield anymore. He does not want me to feel unloved, rejected, abandoned, not good enough, displaced, critiqued. He does not want my heart to bleed desperation or my soul to feel slaughtered by the enemy. Do you want to know for 27 years I was in agreement with the enemy? 27 years. I refuse to agree with that today. I will work hard, but I won't neglect my family. I used to overwork to avoid things. Now I'm present in both. I will train hard, but not until exhaustion. I won't have an incredible day and then go home and spoil myself with bad food. I believe that the body, the spirit, and the soul need to be in alignment to serve God and to be obedient to his word, and I want to be present in that. I want to be the most whole person I can be while on this planet, and I'm going to take it upon myself to educate people in the word of my test and my testimonies. I have a foundation for my life today, and I get to ramp others up into their emotional, spiritual, and physical space. How awesome is that? So again, I said this is my revival. I am definitely a miracle, and I feel like everybody in here in some way is a miracle. Right. I've come from being a lost and broken teenage mother with no spiritual life for over 20 years. How sad to know that I walked through most of my 20s lost and alone. My mother died, and I truly believe that a part of me died with her. Through her death and the aftermath and the ugliness that was created, guess what? I found God. I was broken, I was alone, I was desperate, but I was willing. I wanted to be his student, not just in the struggle, but forever his student. I was thirsty for life back then, and I'm even more thirsty for it today. Today, no matter what my season is, nobody gets to take that away from me. I know in my soul that God loves me, and he will never leave me. Thank you, Pastor Francis, for having me share my story. Thank you, Bob, for taking me to Haiti. You guys have done so much for me, and it gets me to continue to heal and just be more human. So thank you.